I'm Winka Dubbeldam, architect, the principal of Archi-Tectonics, New York and Amsterdam. And you find yourself here in our office in New York, which is on the East River in the financial district. I'm going to explain a little bit about how we work. I'll show you some models around the office, and I think we go from there. Obviously, as everyone else does right now, we work completely in the computer. But maybe what is interesting to know is we worked very early on in the computer, like around 1994 when I started my office. And what was interesting is we would design everything three-dimensional on the computer, but then draw all the drawings by hand, which then flipped over around 98 when we did our first really big building by actually doing everything in the computer. And now, of course, we print, 3D print also all the models. Having been, raised in like kind of the 80s, 90s, we were already over kind of, let's say, the 30s and 50s modernism. We were also already past postmodernism. We were kind of in a new era that was very digital, right? So I guess I'm one of the first generations, or part of one of that first generation that was already in school digital. And from digital comes also a direct relationship of designing in 3 dimensions. And 3 dimensions means that you always think of things in forms and solids and not as plans and elevations, which is a big departure in architecture. I think the generation before us was always, or very often, first developing in plan and then slowly into section. And we have always been like that. So the forms became, I guess, more and more bulbous. And I started to really like what that did for the architecture, but also for the space inside of it. So yeah, so we like to kind of keep the studies of all the things we've done. And keep them kind of together. So, and then this is our kind of little archive with all the things we kind of have done, and I like to kind of keep these. Typically we design very three-dimensional, both in design in the computer, but also we constantly test it in these models, and the 3D printer is of course really great for that. I'm going to walk around a little bit with you and show you some models about the buildings first, I think. This is a very strange building in a way, because it's a 9-story building, but it has more like a set of stacked villas. So this, funny enough, is the front street elevation, but the back is kind of the most interesting, because here, both in the front and the back, you can actually it's very difficult to find out what are the apartments. And there's actually 2 triplexes, full floors and a duplex. And quite nice is that there is a parking in the basement. So when you approach the building, part of the facade actually sinks in the floor, and you can drive your car in. So that these gardens are actually rooftops of the parking. And then, of course, with very large cantilevers. So it's in a way, very European building. The balconies are extremely deep. They're about 4 to 5 meters, because we felt it was really important that they're outside rooms and not like little slivers stuck out of the building. Really fun was the curtain wall. The curtain wall in the front is stone, translucent stone, glass, and translucent glass.
Yeah, Vestry Street is a really nice project in the sense that it's a big building, but only a few apartments. It's more like, we call it a set of stacked villas. Everyone is different. It comes back a little bit to the idea of now when we design in the computer, we really don't have to make a standard apartment. So every apartment is customized. It was a super interesting client. I think he let us just completely design it how we wanted. The way we transition the one facade to the other, because they're so different, is through different levels in the building. So we try to make as few walls inside as possible, but really change the zones by making different heights, by lowering the floor, by changing the height of the ceiling, so that the volume starts shifting rather than the simple flat plate and columns. It's an amazing building to live in. I think it's very geared towards a different kind of lifestyle and a different living experience.
This one is actually quite interesting. This was an installation in the museum in Washington. These are 8 meters high. They're made from sound frequencies. So we had a sound designer create a sound piece for the space, and we took the frequencies and then created the volumes out of it. We call them soundscapes. And then in the museum itself, we had robotic speakers that scanned the surfaces again. So it was quite an intense installation. And the way they were fabricated was from aerated concrete. So they felt very, they were actually done with machine saws. It's quite a dangerous kind of way of producing things. But they were incredibly impressive because it was huge elements. So here you actually see an example of how we 3D print very quick studies, but then we very often end up doing a much bigger model like this one is here. This study was actually a very interesting study for a hotel with condominiums where essentially we build a full building envelope, and you come in one side of the tower. The tower is kind of a loop with an opening here, and then on this side is actually where the pool sticks out. So the whole thing functions around this opening and keeps folding and unfolding. And it was built from dark gray glass and dark gray stone. So it's a curtain wall with glass and stone, actually not dissimilar to that one. A villa we did for a client in Peru. So I guess maybe what is peculiar about our office is that we tend to work on all scales. We design furniture for Italian furniture manufacturers, but we also make gigantic urban schemes for clients in China, Tel Aviv, and recently in Latin America, in Bogota. So, and then in between we have multiple scales. We have very often, for some weird reason, clients just walking in our office and going like, I have a project for you. And this was one of the clients who is himself a builder, lives in Lima, Peru, and wanted a car museum for his private collection of about 20 cars and a house on top of it. And so this is actually the house. And it integrates the car museum below it. So the house itself sits in a very enclosed garden. And you can start to see here that the museum sits under it. Now the roof is really undulating, and what is interesting is that that undulating roof is also the way the museum is designed. The house itself is kind of a volume which sits within, is kind of separate volumes which sit within a larger screen. And the beauty of it is that not only it works with the climate there, but also, of course, what works is that because of these creases, you look down. This is the whole car museum. The garden kind of is a topology that sits on top of it. And then the idea is that these moments, you constantly are aware as you're approximating the house that this car museum is down here. So you're now entering the house. As you saw, you got like a major view of the car museum. And then you walk through. For us, the way we design is very much from the inside out. We're very interested in performative issues. We're not very interested in aesthetics or style or even form. But for us, the most important thing is that each project has its own characteristics so that it kind of creates itself almost. So this was really created from the idea that we wanted to create this museum which kind of came up through the house. Client of us asked to develop a new concept for a meditation center, and not only did it have to be a meditation center, he also wanted to be able to spread this in other cities, in other countries. So we had to think of it as industrial design, but also as something that potentially could be built prefab and that we could distribute very easy to local manufacturers. Because we were not thinking of designing it prefab and making it, for example, in New York and then distributing it. We were really thinking make very smart drawings, like a manual, and send the drawings to another prefab manufacturer, for example, in England or in Asia, and have it manufactured locally. Also because we were thinking the only way to be sustainable is if you manufacture things locally. And the only way to be smart is if you design things locally. So that's where we started from. It's a very interesting subject because I think, especially as an architect, when you meditate or when you're having a massage or something else like that, you often realize that ceilings are not the most beautiful thing. So one of the first things we realized of the meditation center, we wanted it to be a very holistic continuous surface that would really envelop you, but also would not distract you. So it would be a very calm kind of space. We wanted to build it from bamboo because it's strong, it's super tensile, it's very easy to form. And we could go from a solid surface to something that is a frame or, in this case, almost like a basket. So we were weaving the ceiling from a solid ring into a form that is more or less a basket. So from the outside, you only see this very strange, large, heavy form, but that sits very light on the floor. But you go you go through the portal, and you find a space that is totally different. And people really, literally go, "Wow." And I think it calms people immediately down. So that was that. Center has been a huge success, and it's
within a year, it is running really, really well, which is surprising to me because, you know, it's meditation. It's very unpredictable how that would evolve.
And for example, it's always amazing for me that we go to our car or a plane and somehow they seem much better made than our buildings.
You could say I'm a frustrated car designer, and there's something about the way cars are designed that is not happening in architecture, and you know, you could say why. But maybe the more interesting thing is to figure out how to get to the level of precision that is in car design, but that also comes back to the padding of surfaces. So it comes back to comfort, it comes back to you push a button and the window opens. Those kind of comforts we are very used to in small environments like a car, but they are very unusual in architecture. And I started looking at all the things I was looking at, and that they were starting to look like each other. And noticing that, I thought, this is really interesting. What is going on? Like, why am I fascinated with these things?
The attempt here was to fold the wall towards the glass and to have the glass really come out of the wall. Not in the normal way with mullions, but to really build everything into the walls. So here, this tower was actually worked and designed to have similar attributes. So we worked actually on this tower with car designers, which is really, really great. So that's, and that starts very often with a small idea that I create, maybe sitting in a train, folding some ideas, and then we build a segment, and then actually the tower comes from that segment. So the tower I just showed you is actually shown here as the whole tower with a very beautiful skinny side in a parking lot. This tower is completely operational as a robotic tower.
A former person that worked in our office that was an architect and then became a fashion designer. And because he worked in my office, he knows I'm Dutch. When he had a fashion biennale in Holland, he said, we have to collaborate on this. And it was an interesting biennale in the sense that all the fashion designers were working with quite interesting architects. So it was a really lovely, kind of stunning exhibition. When we started thinking about it, I said to Ziki, is his name, Ziki Im, why don't you give me your favorite pattern, fashion pattern? And then what we will do is we will transform this in Maya, which is a 3D animation program, in the computer to a 3D form. So I'm thinking he's going to give me a really amazing avant-garde fashion piece. No, he comes with a very normal jacket, which is kind of was a challenge for us because we thought, okay, now we have a normal jacket, so it doesn't really matter. So we took the pattern of the jacket, not the jacket itself, and we took the pattern and started like making it into a solid, inflating it, and in the process of doing this, I started thinking of this material I'd once seen before. That was a thick fabric that is impregnated with concrete. The beauty of this material is it's maybe 1.5 centimeters thick, or maybe 1 centimeter. And when you spray it with water, it turns into solid concrete, but very thin. And then we worked with a really great sculptor in Holland because, for normal contractors, this was way too difficult. And we made a frame that is kind of like a rebar frame, like how you would reinforce concrete. that we made a very flexible frame. They draped the concrete cloth over it. I gave them 5 methods of attaching. So they could stitch, they could use rivets, they could bend, and they could pleat. But I did not tell them where. So I gave them the 3D shape and I gave them 5 methods, and I say, whatever works the best for you, do it. And this turned out to be so beautiful. It was funny because when we came to the Biennale, the people were, everyone was kind of like knocking on it or smelling it or banging on it and kind of studying it. No one knew what it was. And the organization came to me and they said, this is our favorite, because we all call it the cuddly elephant. So I guess that's also a solid in a way. After the Biennale, people were trying to save it and bring it to a music festival and things like that, but it was very difficult. You know, it was large and it was really, it was really not meant to be moved. So in the end, it died.
This is actually a study for lights that were in production, where the design is very three-dimensional. It's a polycarbonate and an aluminum, both stamped in the same shape. So as you can see here, this shape and this shape is actually kind of made from the same 3D model. But then when you put them together, they seamlessly connect into each other. So you get this kind of very 3D thing. I always think like one of my big rules is that you have to design the bottom of things. You cannot do only the top. So we tend to be very three-dimensional.
We were asked to compete in invited competition for a very large sports park with 2 stadiums and parking and a big shopping mall in China, and that is for the Asian Games in 2022. When we were designing the large stadium, I was developing basically the stadium as a volume inside of another volume. And when we were working on it, it kind of remained very unchallenged. So with the office, we started working on pushing the one volume through the other, and slightly shifting it and cutting it. And so it was really interesting because it was these kind of very precise manipulations, one after the other, that slowly made the solid or this massive shape into a bit of an alien. And I was looking for an alien. I was looking for something that would feel familiar, but also would feel of both the ancient past and the far future. So I was kind of fighting this almost like eternal form. And we chose to finish the shapes into brass shingles, so it's a very soft golden glow. That's one volume, and the other volume that intersects is a kind of a diagonal diagrid, and it's more glassy. So after long story short, we worked on this really intensely. We only had 6 weeks to do the whole competition. It's 450,000 square meters, the whole site. The stadium is about 34,000 square meters, so it's for a stadium not as large. It's a 5,000 seat stadium, but it's a big shape. And lo and behold, I mean, it was a very difficult presentation, very large jury that was sitting very far away, and I was like, I came out of it, and it was the first time that I presented. I thought this did not go very well, and we were like, kind of tired and exhausted. Went back to the hotel, flew back to New York the next day, and then 2 days later, we heard we won, which was kind of the craziest thing, because I always think when I present, wow, that went really well, and this is the first time that I thought this did not go well at all. And we won, so it's very nice. So now we're working really hard on getting it done.
Funny nigga.
In a way, sometimes the process is as interesting. The process of developing, of meeting people who make interesting materials, and we really love that. We think that architecture really changes through the collaboration with amazing, innovative people who develop new materials or who think of new manufacturing methods. So we are very focused on those kind of collaborations, also because we really like to change the state of architecture. No, this is perfect.
Ladies.